series. Going up back at Parish.
See if that works. Well, welcome everybody. So this is what we're calling the St. Bernard History Lecture Series. What I hope to do, not a grand ambition at all, is just tell the entire story of St. Bernard from the beginning to now. So 4,500 years ago until the present. Let's see. So this is going to be following the history of St. Bernard through a single plot of land. And this is going to be the Battery Bienvenue Military Reservation. And just act as if that's our character and that's the story we're talking about. And it's a very unimportant piece of land that's at the far edge of St. Bernard. However, kind of like Forrest Gump or some of these other characters, it just seems to have been part of, in a small way, an uncanny amount of important history. So I thought it was a lot of good choices to pick one little place to trace through. I think this was a good one. All right, so, and this we're going to see if, I've also, you'll find out, I shouldn't tell you this part, but I'm exploring a few more tools with my video camera, which I've always just done a static video like this. I took it out, and so I have some videos in here that probably don't quite apply, but I just wanted to use that. And I also learned how to use Google Earth. So we're going to see if so this is the wasn't that dramatic? All right. So now, of course, this is a modern day version of Lake Bourne. We'll get there, but our little plot of land is just off of this, but intimately connected with Lake Bourne and its history. All right, so going way, way back, and next month we'll get a lot more detail on this, but going back to the actual formation of our little plot of land, it goes back, and you'll see these are the Mississippi River, the different paths of it, and that's how the entire Louisiana Delta was formed. Our part of it, which of course is over there where the orange is, was the St. Bernard Delta from about 4,500 years ago from the present to 1,000. And you'll see the present one, which is the red, is the current one, which is the black ones. So our bit of land was in the orange one. Basically, we're also going to talk about land formation today. I think most everybody knows how it works. The whole delta from the river is formed. The river's coming down. There's a crevasse, breaks in it. The river, when it's big enough for them, there are hundreds and hundreds of them. When big enough, the river changes courses. As the river comes down, it brings sediment with it. When it overflows its banks, the edges, what the space along the river is the highland. That's where all the sediment is deposited. And so that's what happened here. Very interesting, which I didn't know, that I guess until very recently, there's no native pebble or stone to St. Bernard, except for those that might have gotten caught in a tree coming down. Because of course those are too heavy, so it all filtered out. So, this is our part of the area, and we'll see, these are of course, the result of all the formation, the delta formation. The important ones are going to be in yellow, and actually I have a pointer, but so these, I guess maybe I can try. No, we're just going to go with it. All right, so the parts in yellow are the distributaries, and a very important one is down at the bottom right. That's going to be eventually Bayou Terremouf, and for about 500 years in this period, that was the Mississippi River. And so Bill Highland at the Islamic Museum, of course the bio goes right out in front, he tells people you're standing on where the Mississippi River was, which is true. Our part, which is mainly going to be Bayou Bienvenue, is going to be about the center coming off of Lake Bourne. And so the yellow is not as thick, but so it wasn't the river, but it was the former distributary. All right, so kind of above where that pink fill is. Of course, this is the modern effect. Also, the bayous are going to be generally freshwater. The bayous, of course, go into the saltwater, either Lake Bourne or the Gulf. but generally they're slow moving. There's not a lot, there are tides, and there's some current sometimes when there's rainfall, but there's not a lot of switching. So it's going to be important to our story that for a lot of the time the bayou was freshwater. All right,
Need me to go up?
yeah, I think you're going to have to. I think our clicker just ran out of battery. So we'll wait. We'll put pressure on Michelle to run up there. All right, so as we're going to see in a little bit, then we're going to trace through, since we are talking about a piece of land, we need to try to guess how that land changed over time to get to its current state. And this is not history. I am very comfortable with almost an engineer's approach to history. You have to have the facts, and there has to be backing up of the facts, and you never kind of guess, because then you can get your own, you kind of tend to validate what you want it to be. And I'm going to do that today a little bit too. And so for a lot of what we have to do, we do have to make these guesses until much later. There is no video from way back when. All right, so now we're going to move on to the different eras. The first is going to be pretty much from the formation all the way up to about 1718. So this is before the Europeans come to New Orleans in 1718. And this is mostly when Native Americans will be here. This map is from about the 1680s, 1690s. So one of the first ones, and next slide, please. Next slide. All right, so this is a close-up of that same map. And what we're going to see over here is that is the Lake Bourne area, right down, kind of about right in the center. Their maps are going to have to tell the story, because those are the images that we have. And there's a lot wrong with these early maps. We can see it's way out of kilter. But next slide, please. You're going to see that what mainly is Lake Bourne kind of has this shape, a kind of up and down shape. There is some inlets, eventually what we would call the Gulf. But however, this is going to be important. Next slide, please. So that's in without it. And also on this, as far as Native Americans, we'll go more to that next time. Really, in each of the eras, there's very, very little Native American presence down in our part, where our part of the land will be, at St. Bernard Parish. A little bit later on, in some of the later periods, there might be one or two. We know of one in Shell Beach and some others. But I was surprised by the complete lack. It must have been very inhospitable, or at least all the records have gone. This is a map of the Native American villages, so you'll see a bunch everywhere else, and none listed here as far as the late 1600s. But I still like to think in our little piece of land, there must have been some hunting parties that went by, and that would have been a natural place to stop. So I kind of like to think at least some were visited. Next slide, please. All right. This is the very famous, now into the European phase in about 1720. All right, and let me back up one to about this time previously, where we talk about the height of the land and ideas of subsidence. And I guess most people here know about subsidence, that once as the rivers come by and overtop the high ground, the banks, leave that sediment, the land grows. As soon as that stops, the land starts to sink. And it's a big issue now, very complex. I've looked into it, and it depends on so many things in the area and all that. But a simple way to look at it is, after the ending of when the river changed and the distributary kind of stopped being the main part, that's when the subsidence started. So I estimated that I've seen calculations that maybe about 2 feet a century is about right in the middle of where you are, different places and all that. That might be a good estimate. So when I estimate about the 1700 or so, that probably our little spot of land at Battery Benvenue was maybe 8 to 12 feet above sea level. And at that point, it was probably with a very strong bayou, very protected. So it might have been what is the extreme of the area around here called a chenier, where there are probably a lot of oak trees, like an oak forest. It's probably very high and they're bare there, and it would not seem like a forest anywhere else. I don't know that, but I'm hoping that by about 1717, give or take, it had probably sunk enough, but would still have that. So now we're at 1720 and the coming of Europeans, and this is a very famous Delatour map from 1720, so early in New Orleans. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right, here you go. Okay, so this is a close-up of one of the pieces of that, and we'll see right in the very middle is Lake Bourne. There's still some issues of this. However, if we see, and one of the biggest issues is, it does not have Bayou Bienvenue, so it doesn't quite go to our little place of land, which by this time is probably like 3 or 4 miles off of that. But if you see the little flipper just to the left of Lake Bourne, the little thing sticking out, that's probably Bayou Bienvenue. So this is 1720. Lake Bourne is an oval. And you'll see that the outlet to the Gulf is pretty much land. Now, we're going to get into a situation where I'm going to kind of choose to believe that this was pretty much accurate. And we know in St. Bernard that at any given time, the land could appear very wet or very dry in some places, and these especially. So we have all those complexities about, was this an accurate map maker, what time of the year was it, all that. But still, it's very interesting to me because we're going to see a very different case very soon, that Lake Bourne seemed almost landlocked. And other interesting things, we can't really see them, but on the right side of Lake Bourne, kind of out into the Gulf, we see this a lot, and they have things on the map that says low and marshy meadows. My interpretation of that is a saline marsh. All right, so there's plenty of salt water on the right side, and so we'll see, of course, that it's a very different environment. However, on the left side of Lake Bourne, where our little piece of land is, they generally have what they call prairies or trembling prairies. I need feedback. There's something we have some experts here, but as best I can tell, that's pretty much going to be a freshwater marsh or a freshwater prairie. I think that, and especially this time before subsidence, that if you looked at that, it's not like a marsh. It would be it would be probably high ground that could have a lot of water on it at times, so things could not grow so much. We will see a little bit later on that maybe cows that were native here, that were here before the first, at least before the 1700s, could have grazed on it and that kind of thing. Or at least I'm hoping that, because that has an effect on what we think that our little piece of land looks like. All right? So Lake Bourne, Bourne means one-eyed or blind in one eye in French. And so this was called Lake Bourne. A little bit later on, in the 1850s or so, in kind of the standard historical response, a guy, I'm probably going to mispronounce my French with my South Georgia accent, but Gaillard, G-A-Y-A-R-E, somebody correct me on that, who's just a ubiquitous historian. This was in the mid-1800s, though, when I think a lot of land loss had happened. He said that what Lake Bourne meant, it didn't mean literally one-eyed. It meant that it was a defective lake because it had such a wide opening to the sea. It wasn't like a real lake. It was kind of a not very good lake. And thus, since it was defective, it was like a blind man would be defective. So that's how he described Lake Bourne. However, I have no basis to say it really, but I think he's completely wrong. And I think given he's going for maps that show a very different land. So next slide, please. All right, so instead, if you're French in the 1720s and you turn the map this way and see Lake Bourne now, all right, next slide. All right, so you see a face, which is one eye, and next slide. All right, so I think it makes sense, and it lends proof that maybe Lake Bourne, what could have been landlocked at this time, but changed over the time. Because as we'll see, what emerged from this is pretty much a story of land loss. All right, so also there are going to be quite a few funny translations. many different nationalities at this time, French, Spanish, English. So pretty much somebody took an English writer took the same map and made their own map out of it, and they called the lake Blind Lake. So that was interesting. And then Bayou Terrebonne, which was the best one of all, I think it was the same map. They means land of the cows or whatever. And so they translated that to be Beef River. That was interesting. All right, next slide, please. All right, there's a 1778 map. Next slide. All right, so this is a close-up of Lake Bourne once again, and you'll see that now, next slide, there's like a little bulb, more so like our current situation. And we're going to see that's going to become much more pronounced of the little bulb. Next slide. Right? And so it's a big mystery to me, what happened. Was it bad map making before? Or if maybe I think that maybe a hurricane or a land loss subsidence, that there's also a bigger opening to the Gulf now, and that the water action kind of, because this is going to go right into Bayou, right into where our little piece of land is, that maybe over time, over that 100 years, the combination of land loss kind of scoured that out. I don't know that, but it's just very interesting because we're going to see that it's kind of keeping its same shape, but this bulb is developing. All right, so next slide, please. And this is also an important map, an 1806 map. LaFawn and then is one of the two main engineers, along with Latour, who also did a good map, a series of good maps, who helped Jackson, who were the main two military engineers for Jackson in the Battle of New Orleans. One of our previous lecturers, Enid Fandridge, was certain that LaFawn was a much more respected than Latour, but of course Latour is very famous because he wrote the history book on it. Next slide. All right. So once again, this is the close-up of it, and you'll see now the opening just on you see the same general slate, but now there's a huge bulb. Next slide, I might have done that. Yeah, it did. So now it's the same shape, but there's a huge bulb on the left, and the opening on the right to the Gulf. It is not lake-like anymore. And so this is getting the time where Gaillard might have thought that. All right, next slide. Another interesting thing is that with the commerce of our little piece of land, mainly through Lake Bourne, at this time, of course, this is Lake Pontchartrain. New Orleans is on high ground. It was founded, a lot of people think, because it had a portage through Bayou St. John that the Indians used to Lake Pontchartrain. So you could easily come between the two. Bayou St. John, which is on Lake Pontchartrain, was in the top 10 largest ports in the nation around this time. Huge trade. Because what happened was, to go down Mississippi River, because of sandbars and things like that, or because there were sailing ships, and if the wind wasn't just right around English Turn and other places, it could your cargo, you got a bigger ship, but it could take over a month or two to get in, as well as a month or two to come up the river because the sandbars out of the delta, with our material coming down continuing. So it was much quicker, but certainly had insurance there. You knew what happened. People would go through Lake Pontchartrain, through Lake Bourne, like to Pensacola and Mobile, packet services, lots and lots of goods got shipped and people went that way. So it was a huge trade that way. And in addition, we don't like to talk about it too much in St. Bernard. This is the time of pirates and smuggling as well. So we're going to see that in addition to that trade, which would come pretty close to Lake Bourne, Bayou Bienvenue, which we'll see in a little bit, where our piece is on, that goes almost all the way into New Orleans, and it's going to be a route of smuggling. And this time, smuggling is not as bad as it sounds. It's really just trade that it's illegal, but it's very well accepted. So the reason we're going to get to Bayou in a second, trade would go through Bayou Bienvenue, then down Bayou Maxent, there are a bunch of spellings of that, down to the Villa Plantation, the Cost Plantation, and others. And that's how goods would come in. They'd get to somewhere along there, they get to the River Road and be sent to New Orleans. All right, so we're going to see the trade is going to be a lot of that.
Taxless trade.
What's that?
Taxless.
That's right. It had more to do with just the mercantilist system and tariffs and those kind of things, right? So, all right. Interestingly, at this time too, names in history vary greatly. Bayou Bienvenue is not spelled with an E in any of these papers in this time. It just ends in E. And we'll see that changes for some reason. All right, next slide. Now we get to the Battle of New Orleans, and this is the first time our little spot of land is going to be named. And so look, Lake Bourne, of course, is way over there to the right, and there's a winding bayou all the way pretty much to above the Meridian in New Orleans. It's going to be Bayou Bienvenue. And then the ones that come down is Bayou Maxent, a bunch of names with that. So our guy here, our good friend in the mid-1860s, talking about this time period around the Battle of New Orleans, 1814, 1815, they said that the old French maps called this Bayou Bienvenue, called River St. Francis. The people of the neighborhood, who I assume are the St. Bernard folks, it was Bayou des Pêcheurs, and that's how I'm done. And then, but as far as the size of it, pretty amazing, that Bayou Bienvenue, it says it's navigable for vessels of 100 tons, all the way up to this, I think this major fork of what was a Pyrenees plantation. It was 110 to 150 yards wide, 6 feet of water at common tides and 9 feet of spring tides. It could have enough for 200 to 300 ton vessels. And so it was a huge, so at this time, we're going to see that changes, but this was a big distributary too. So it must have had very high banks. They were still built up, and a lot of, 100 yards wide is pretty good. So our piece of land, which is going to be at a major intersection of that, because the major other bayou coming out was Bayou Maxent, and so our piece of land is at the intersection of those two. So it must have been greatly built up, all right, to be that major. But we're going to see that changes later. All right, so we also see that talking about, this is going to be about in 1858, so about 50 years later, in a newspaper article. I don't know if it's that trustworthy or not, but they described the same Bayou Bienvenue that I just described as a pretty impressive waterway. They described it, they went through a tour, they called it Fisherman's Bayou, yet another name, and they said that it was now a narrow, almost stagnant drain of dark, unattractive looking water, winding away through open fields into the recesses of the forest. All right, so it obviously changed a lot in those 50, 60 years. So that's another mystery maybe we need to look into. All right. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a little bit closer of the way that the British are going to go into the Chalmette to get to the battle. So they come through Lake Bourne. This is going to be in red. If you see that little space right by Lake Bourne, it's Fisherman's Village. And that was the very famous place that apparently the British paid off the fishermen to allow them through. I've heard estimates that up to 300 people would live in this Fisherman's Village. So possibly, and you can even see it has a pretty good size marking with a grid where it was located. So it was a large establishment. I don't know, generally, you're not going to have fishermen that need to live together quite in those large numbers. This is a small area at this time. Now, if this was a transshipment place where ships came in through the bayou, dropped off, stopped, and then come through, maybe you need a large place for that. Who knows? But nonetheless, it's known as the Fisherman's Village, a village of Spanish and Italian fishermen who would take their fish through the canals to sell in New Orleans. At the time, it said it was 1.5 miles from the Fisherman's Village to Lake Bourne. And so so we'll see. So they came down through, They came to Bayou Mazan this time. It's going to connect up with Villeray Canal, and that's when they came. So that's a pretty common story, came all the way through. The story and history generally is that it was a heroic trip. The British soldiers are sinking to their necks in mud, those kind of things. It was such a long, strenuous journey. I can't discount that, but I just question because at this time, these are huge bayous, more like the riverside that must, to be that big, have pretty tall banks. So we're going to see what I think they might look like. But I'm guessing up at the bayou is like a clear space, and then it's more, maybe it was a very wet winter, and that could have contributed to it. But it's not swamp the way I was thinking of swamp, being from Georgia. And it's not really saline marsh that also would not hold up somebody. So I think it at least much more land than I really thought. All right, so, and we'll see, also this time you'll see our piece of land is what says Fort Villeray in between, at the conjunction of Bayou Mazan and Bayou Bienvenue. There's also talk around this time on April 3rd of 1815, Jackson is worried about the British coming down. They're going to send a crew up to Bayou Bienvenue from the backside, who make it all the way to to Fort Villeray, what they call Fort Villeray here. I think that's an American name though. And they see the British have built a fortification there, and then the British are also going out and they're burning the grasses on either side. So I think what we're going to see is that these prairie grasses are probably man-high, but grass, which is very, very high. That's the trembling prairie part of it. So the British were burning those grasses so Americans couldn't hide there. And so that's what we'll see with that a little bit later on. All right. So now, next slide, please. Okay. So, and one more. This is a Latour map. And so we'll see the same thing. Lake Bourne is shaped a little bit differently, but you see it comes off, and now our little spot of land is called Fort Villeray Breastwork. That's a really interesting thing there. All right, next slide. So I think that, just guessing now, that maybe by this time, if our spot of land is about 6 to 9 feet due to subsidence, but it's had this freshwater levee to protect all this time. It's not open. And so I think it would be maybe equivalent to a cypress forest. These are all very gradual changes, so who knows for sure. And so, Michelle, you can play the video. Actually, go back to that one, but you can go down and play the video. So forward one, forward one, forward one, other way. Go the other way. All right, so go forward a bunch. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. One more. All right, stop and see if you can play the video down in the bottom left corner. So this is an actual video from when the British were invading. And you can hear them in the background, the cannons are playing. But this is what I imagine, this is the cypress forest. I would imagine that this would be about what our little spot of land might look. There's probably a clearing right by the bayou, but then there's probably this forest a long way back, and then eventually you get to the trembling prairie, is my guess. All right, so next slide. It also mentioned in some of the history that the British fortifications were built back from the bayou by the woods. So cleared area before then, and then maybe that was there. All right. So now we finally become Bayou Bienvenue. So Fort Villeray was the British built it because it was obviously high land, very important. The British were defeated, they left. Americans, quite rightly, were very worried about another invasion, and so they built a series of forts, Battery View being one of them, to protect against the next invasion. And in 1817 was the commencement, which is start of the planning and everything, and you'll see, so December of 1826, construction is going to begin, and the original plan was to have a garrison, a peacetime garrison of 25 soldiers. Can you imagine spending a summer in one of these places? In a heavy uniform, doing drills, all that kind of stuff? That's, of course, how it all worked. Wartime, planned out a wartime of 224 people, and it didn't quite work out, but it was so-called a first-class work, which was the highest level of fortification. Of course, it's going to turn out to be very difficult. As we all know from the very beginning, because of what they call the marshy land, there were extreme construction difficulties. It was completed in 2 years under Captain William H. Chase of the Army Corps of Engineers. And interestingly, it used what are called military slave rentals. And so slaves helped to build it. In Louisiana, because the conditions were so brutal, the workers who did get paid had to be paid a lot more to put up with those conditions. So a carpenter would make $78 a month in Louisiana, and the same work, $27.50 in New York. All right, so I guess I would be out there in the summer. So finished it. So finished in 2 years, but after everything was calculated, the cost was $96,000, which is obviously a lot. In 1842, it becomes a military reservation, and so the history that I got said a 1,200-foot radius. I don't really pay attention to that because I don't believe it, because if I did my calculations, and it's just a huge area. But anyway, a large area. The military took that, Louisiana State gave it over, and thus it becomes a federal military reservation. Lots of repairs and improvements needed, and in part were overseen by a major PGT Beauregard, who would be famous later, and it was planned to have a garrison of 150 men, more subsidence, more renovation, all that stuff. And so by 1851, the total cost was about $130,000, which was 4 times the cost of Tower to Crew, which, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, next slide, please. In the Civil War, just to kind of keep going with it was not occupied at the beginning. Late 1861, of course, the Civil War has been declared and all that. The fort is going to be occupied by Confederate troops, the Company D of the 22nd Louisiana Infantry, and at the time it contained 10 24-pounder guns, which is a lot. It was abandoned, of course, the Civil War history that New Orleans, when the North came in, New Orleans left right away. They surrendered very easily. So it's a good thing for us because everything exists. But in addition, when New Orleans surrendered, of course, it made no sense to have the batteries stay. So on April 25th of 1862, they spiked all the guns, which is what you do. And then they boarded steamers, which I thought was kind of funny. Probably came off Lake Bourne and went to Covington. And then they're going to go serve, these are Confederate troops, they're going to go serve in various places in Mississippi and others. All right. It was occupied by a small contingent of federal troops, but then they were evacuated. But then for some reason they came back. And so eventually by November 1865, reoccupied, more armament was put in. And so as a plan of 1869, there are going to be 6 cannons of pretty good size. Next slide. So this is the plan of it. We'll see across the front, which pretty much still exists, let's say a brick wall surrounded by a moat. In the back, because they figured it was marshy enough that they were not expecting any land forces to come by land. So it wasn't really built in the back. But so, just want to point out for later on, you'll see the 6 emplacements where the cannons would go. What I also have in yellow is the powder magazine. which still pretty much exists today. And then just look at the formation where it says soldiers' quarters, especially those two squares on either end. And just the shape of that, because we'll be able to see that, what barely exists, a little bit later on. Next slide. So now we're going to move to about 1914, give or take. So it's gone a little bit further. This is a great map, and so we see over in Lake Bourne with Bayou Bienvenue in yellow going all the way. Next slide. So this is a close-up of the same map, and we see our place, Bayou Bienvenue, that's marked now with the right name. This is Bayou Mercier pop out of nowhere for me. I'd never seen any maps before or since, but I thought that was kind of interesting that it generated. As you can see, it's kind of a continuation of Bayou. Now it's called Maxent, whereas usually it was Mazant before. All right. And also notice down in the bottom right corner, Tower Dupree. Y'all might know of Tower Dupree or Martello's Castle. It's called a few other things. I've got some pretty good video of it, but now it's just before Katrina, it was still intact, pretty good shape. Now it's just a row of stones. But if you notice this is 1914, note that it is built on the land, which makes sense. You know, it's going to protect along the canal. And so, next slide.
Curtis, is Bayou Mercier still there, or was it ever there, or?
You know, it's not my area, but I looked on every map, I couldn't find it. And so, on all historical maps, they don't include everything but Hatton. But I think on current maps, of course, it's also eroded. In today's maps, it's eroded, so nothing really exists. So maybe some people who've been around for a while might know. It's a mystery. You know, so I really like the sign, it's just interesting. All right, so this is the current day of Tower Dupree. And of course, as we know, Mr. Joe came in, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But so that red line is from Tower Dupree to the shore, and that's 0.51 miles. So from 100 years, seemingly the Lake Bourne shoreline receded a half a mile. We'll talk some more about that too. This just kind of figure out the mystery of the land loss and everything. All right, next slide. All right, so this is a close-up of Bayou Bienvenue. All right, so we'll go across. This is about the ending point right here. And so and this corresponds with historical maps that it does it continues on to that right there. And now the industrial canal is cut it off and everything. So it went all this way, and it's going to change over time, but now, as best I can tell, it ended up where current Almonaster crosses Florida. And so there's like kind of a raised part of the highway over the railroad track. So anyway, just for what it's worth, it went all that way, which hints at that there was some trade going on. Also, it kind of makes sense at the end of it was where you took out all your goods from the boats and distribute them, that now there'd be railroad there, because it's kind of the same thing, but that's just a guess, who knows? It's just an interesting thing. All right, and now, so Bayou Bienvenue, you'll see, has an E on it, so it gained in that E somewhere along the way. Next slide. All right. This is the same map, and just kind of interesting that down here, you'll see it's called Lake Bourne Canal, and not the Violet Canal, which is what I knew it as. And then right above it, the historians in here will be very surprised to know that the Battle of New Orleans was fought by the Violet Canal. You know, so now y'all know, obviously, that it's just kind of funny. That's a mistake in the map, I'm guessing. You know, or else I learned all the wrong things. All right, next slide. All right, so now, maybe it's 1917. It's been another 100 years. Our little piece of land might have subsided another 2 feet. So I'm going to guess is 4 to 7 feet. The bayou has kind of gotten filled in and slower. The edge of the bayou then overflows kind of sunk a little bit more. So I'm guessing there's kind of an empty space from the bayou to where the fort is now, where there'll still be those woods, because that's not going to go away until probably a little bit later. But then I'm thinking the trembling prairie is going to have encroached greatly. So it wouldn't be too far. And so this is, hit the play button, Michelle. And so this is obviously one of the mirror pastures. But I'm guessing if you let this grow for another few feet, it might be the same kind of thing again. All right. And even, like, I think this would support cows. I think that's why they were native. There were so many of them when the first Europeans came. So I had a few cows in the background. All right. So moving on then. So let's say maybe close to our little piece of land is there. Next slide, please. 18. So after the Civil War, it's a pretty much obsolete place now. So by the government moving in a very quick way, 1877, the War Department decides to sell. It's not needed anymore. All right. Then October 21st, it's not occupied at this time while it's on the block. So by October 21st, the article in the paper saying that it's been decided the War Department will sell. And in 1899, the cannons that are there now, there are 6 of them. There's a report that it's probably the same cannons that are in place. For sure by 1899, it might have been a little bit before. So then, November 5th, 1927 is the newspaper article for the auction, which occurs in a couple days. And then somehow it takes until 1930 for the actual deed to go through, and bought by Julius Sedonka. It's interesting because it's such an unimportant place. I just can find little snippets of it here and there almost randomly in the historical record, especially what it looks like. But Sedonka was a Hungarian immigrant, came over with nothing, happened to have some welding training of acetylene welding, which apparently was brand new at the time. Kind of worked his way up with a place called Dixie. Did I put that in here? Dixie Machine Works. I don't know if that's still around or not. Kind of worked it up, got very wealthy. In 1953 was a mention where he gave money to the St. Mary Choir. So he lived at least until December of 1953, probably longer. And so he's going to buy it, just like a real estate transaction. I think it was $900. I have the deed. It's very fascinating. If you'd like to see it. There's a 14-step direction describing the property. Like this direction, that direction kind of thing, which I eventually try to trace that out and see what it's like. So it's in private hands. I don't know what Sedonka did with it. He's going to keep it.
How many acres?
Well, I have it. I'd be happy to show you. The only historical thing that I had was when they made the military reservation, and it said that they were going to set aside, they asked for a radius of 1,200 yards. But I did my little calculations, and that's like 135 square miles or something. I mean, some huge, I don't know, I might have done it wrong, but pi r squared kind of thing. It's some huge area. But if I'm wrong, then it's a 1,200-yard radius all the way around. So, but I'd love for someone to look at the deed to see. So in my mind, I'm guessing it was just used as a camp. You know, as a fishing camp close to Lake Bourne. I don't know that for sure though. It popped up in the paper that in 1934, poor Lionel de Bouchel, how do you pronounce it, was Dershell, I'm sorry. All right, so there might be some in the audience, maybe I apologize for that, maybe you might know him. He got lost in the St. Bernard Marsh for 2 days and nights. And they finally managed to rescue him at Battery Bend. All right. Then kept until 1951, and that's when the Foss, I think there were three Foss brothers bought it, and have kept it until today. their descendants still own it. So very interesting. So Bayou Bienvenue and the cannons on it are in private hands even till today. All right. Next slide. So this is our current Bayou Bienvenue, and so you'll see that our original shape is almost not even, you almost can't even tell. It's so open and the bowl is so large. All right, next slide. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, you have to do my fancy. You see, I couldn't quite get it, so I had to do a little jog. All right, so that's our, it's kind of hard to see, but you'll see the grass here. We'll see some new pictures. The white thing is the powder magazine. Of course, this is Bayou Bienvenue, and this is Bayou Mosaic. Or actually now, it somehow changed along the way. Now it's Bayou Villery. No longer Bayou Mosaic. All right, next slide. Okay, so about trying to calculate in my amateur way the land loss. This is a line. So of course the left of the line is our little piece of land. The right of the line is Lake Bourne. This line is 1.5 miles. In 1914, on that map, the same line, it was 2 miles. And in 1815, about the same line, it was 2.75 miles. So, first 100 years, 3/4 of a mile, the next 100 years, half a mile. So, next slide, please. Okay, so now we're kind of coming to the current place. And by the way, even on the early Lake Bourne maps, the very first ones that showed that little bulb, it'll give, I guess, soundings, depths, and there'd be like 1s and 2s. So it might be a foot at the time. So it was a very gradual process. So these are satellite images starting in, this is kind of the before and after of Katrina now. So you'll see, I'm going to walk over here. So you see again, this outline is the current fort. All right. This is the powder magazine. These are 2 camps. And one of, I'm in touch, or was in the last year or so, with one of the current relatives of the owners. And her grandfather, who might have been close to one of the original ones, lived in one of the camps up to Katrina. You know, he still lived out there. So there were 2 camps. All right, next slide. So August 16th, so just before, so it's looking pretty good. Next slide. September 1st, 2005. So obviously a pretty major event occurred in between there, which scoured out. So you see all the vegetation is gone on the high part itself. And by the way, the high part is now, and I just use Google Earth to do it, set between 2 to 5 feet, 2 to 4 feet really, of this part of the grass area from beginning to end. So next slide. And so that's a little bit better. So this is after, so we're still a year and a half out. And by this time, the pictures show, and we'll see more, that this is saline marsh. I guess we know that Mr. Go was brought in, the salt water came in. The salt water changed the landscape completely, and it's going to add a lot more erosion. I think everybody knows how that works. Next slide. And it's interesting, of course, to see the landscape just changes so much from season to season as well. Next slide. We're going to see that, so now the vegetation is growing on the high part of it, and we'll see a little bit of that. Very interesting to me. At the end of this, we'll see a very short video, a drone of the actual thing, so we'll get a clear image. But those images in back, which now clearly look like that part where there are the soldiers' headquarters and those 2 triangles, you can clearly see that in back. Interesting thing, until I've been out there, I saw the video, but I never knew those were there. I walked back around there, and until we saw this, they were not clearly visible. The powder magazine, that white thing is still clearly visible. Next slide, please. All right, so this is, actually, just do next slide, don't play. This is a video I'm looking out from the 40 Rockaway Canal levee and do that. All right, so go and hit play. All right, see if you go back to the video. Go back one, maybe. And see if you hit play. All right. So this was taken about a year and a half ago in 2015. And we're going to see the best part of the drone video. So this is the wall that we saw where the cannons would face outward. But before, this is Marty Morgan, who's given a lot of lectures. And I think a premier firearms historian in the nation, in my opinion. But when he went there before the storm, all this was land. Putting up to it was originally surrounded by a moat. This is an example of one of the cannons. There are still 6 there, which have that information. At the time, they were the doomsday weapons. They were the largest weapons possible for defense. 40 pounder. This is the drone footage of the same one. And actually, I'm seeing now those places that I never noticed before that were the headquarters. So this is obviously the land itself. And it's saltwater marsh. So just at the very edge right there of the high trees, you take one step, and it's the kind of saltwater marsh you sink into. It was hard to walk past there. It's kind of peaceful, beautiful, but kind of marshland. So I think very little remnant of those camps. There's still some of the pilots. So right at that edge, it's straight marsh. There's no transition. Straight setting marsh. Powder magazines, still pretty much intact. And this is just interesting. This is one of the cannons. Those are high to beach, so it was kind of neat to see they're all in good shape. They've been there since the 1830s, so we think they're still there. Who knows? It's been a year and a half since I checked anyway. So I think that's it. I went longer than I expected to, but does anybody have any corrections they want to give at this time, or you want to wait and as long as you don't laugh about it too much and enjoy it too much, All right. I guess any questions I can try to answer. Yes, sir.
I've seen a lot of reference to a Biden Catalan. That's what they used to call by the evidence. A lot of British maps had it.
Yes, I've seen
Where
it.
did that come from?
Yeah, so the question was, Bayou Catalan was the early name for Bayou Bienvenue, and that's what the British called it. So I've seen in the maps the British did. So around the same time, I'm sure when the British were retreating, they didn't call our little piece of land Fort Billerby. They had their own name for it too, but I don't know what. But it was in a British map as well that was Blind Lake and Beef River and that kind of thing. It's kind of funny to. So all the different countries, it's pretty important information, these maps, because they're all competing, the British, the French, and the Spanish, and so a lot of the maps would be secret knowledge, so they didn't really share too much. So they all have their lots of names and everything. All right? Yes, sir.
I thought that the process was very interesting to see the location of the fort or the battery, and then over a short period of time, just the dissolution of the land. And it reminds me a lot of the Belize down in the mouth of the river, because that was something that was established in the 1720s. And my understanding is that a lot of the land around there has grown up, but apparently you can only find the place now.
Okay. Yeah, it wasn't intentional really, since land loss, of course, is such a hot button political issue and everything. It really wasn't intentional to make it about that, but very obviously became bags. And especially, I skipped over all the 50s, 60s, 70s, but
Yeah, you can't avoid.
that's when it changed into a saline marsh, and that's when the real situation. So the idea being at our St. Bernard's local community meeting, which is the second Monday of the month, we just started that as well. So one of the projects for that group is to determine whether it's worthwhile to try to maybe save the battery beam Buchanans or not, or how would that happen, or, because they are priceless historical artifacts. I don't know that they're priceless in value, but, so I think, so we're trying to figure out maybe a way to at least get started that process. Who, we don't have any jurisdiction or anything, so who knows, but it's very interesting.